Don't let them think we're a couple. That's what she hissed into my ear, right as her new boss walked over to shake hands. No, thanks for coming. No, I'm glad you're here. Just 7 words that snapped something clean in my chest, like a wire pulled too tight. Her fingers stayed light on my elbow, just enough to look polite. The moment her boss arrived, she slipped into a laugh I hadn't heard in years. The flirty kind. The one she used with professors in grad school when she wanted deadline extensions. That laugh used to be mine. Now it was theirs. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise an eyebrow. I just let my hand drop from her back like it weighed too much. Walked away, slow and measured, cutting through the glittering little pockets of clinking glasses and corporate laughter. Not one person stopped me. They didn't see me. That was the point, right? Don't let them think she didn't want me seen. So I became invisible. But one man saw me. The only one not laughing. He sat alone at a corner table, not touching the champagne placed carefully at his seat. Just a short glass of water. No tie. Charcoal suit, expensive but quiet. He looked like someone used to watching the room move around him. Not through arrogance, through calculation. When I reached him, he glanced up, gave the smallest nod. The kind men give when words are a waste of time and reputations are already understood. I sat. You should have seen her from across the room. Floating, glowing, like it was her coronation. I'd helped her pick the dress. Black with a deep green shimmer, not quite daring, but enough to catch a second look. I told her it made her look like a strategist. She said, that's the goal. She didn't glance back once. Not even when her CEO passed us and did a visible double take. Not even when the VP of sales, who hadn't said a word to me at the bar, walked up to Bernard and addressed him as Sir. Not even when the room's laughter softened into something more cautious. She kept laughing just a little too loud, kept her hand on the wrist of the director of strategy for a beat too long. I watched her sip her wine, unaware that the air had shifted, that the applause had quieted not from fatigue, but attention. Toward me, toward him, toward us. And just a quick note here, because most people never think to do it. If you're into stories like this, about quiet betrayals and unexpected reversals, hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it helps the team keep bringing you more, and you wouldn't believe how many people just listen without ever clicking it. Anyway, I've known Bernard Lee for years. Not socially, professionally. He's one of those ghost whales in the investment world. Not flashy, not loud, but when he moves, companies reconfigure. The kind of man who doesn't show up unless it matters. He never attends these galas. But he asked me to join him for this one. Said he wanted a clean read on the leadership culture before finalizing his offer. He didn't know I had skin in the game. I hadn't told him she worked here. She hadn't told anyone she was married. It had been years since I'd brought her around my circle. After the last time, when she called my clients boring, I just stopped mixing worlds. We'd grown apart, professionally. She had always resented that I didn't have a big title or a shiny office. I'd long since stopped correcting her. She liked the idea of being the ambitious one. I let her. But that whisper? That changed something. Not just the words, but the tone. The practiced disinterest. Like I was some random tag-along. And not the man who paid off her tuition, proofread every cover letter, sat with her through 2 failed interviews, and bought her heels when hers snapped the morning of her final panel round. She told me once that she wanted to build something. That she wanted to lead. So I helped her become the kind of woman who could be in these rooms. Now I was the liability. The corner of the ballroom we sat in had a slightly raised platform, likely not on purpose, just a badly designed layout. But from there, Bernard and I could see everything. Every clink, every backpat, every little false smile. And as the night went on, I noticed the pattern shift. Executives stopped looking through me. Now they glanced, measured, curious. That's the thing about power, it doesn't announce itself. It's observed. Bernard didn't say a word for most of the night. He simply watched. Occasionally, he would ask, "Is that one hers?" I'd answer with a name, a background, my voice low, unemotional. I was doing what I'd been asked, assess the integrity of the leadership culture. I just hadn't expected the cancer to be familiar. When dessert arrived, he turned to me and asked, "Do you trust her judgment?" I didn't look her way. I just sipped my drink and said, "Not anymore." And that's when I saw it. She was introducing herself to another investor. Overlapping stories. Emphasizing her project wins, her fast cultural alignment. And for the first time all night, she looked up and saw where I was sitting, and who I was sitting with. Her eyes froze, her mouth opened, and the smile stayed on her face, awkwardly, involuntarily, while her brain caught up. I tilted my glass slightly, just enough to acknowledge her. She blinked, laughed quickly, said something to the woman beside her. But I could see it, the freeze under the surface. The way her eyes darted around the room and began doing the math she should have done hours ago. Because now, people weren't just watching her. They were watching me. And Bernard Lee. It's incredible how some people can perform without ever realizing the stage has shifted beneath them. She floated through the ballroom like she'd rehearsed this her whole life. Hand on sleeves, chin tilted just enough, laugh calibrated to seem spontaneous, but never desperate. She'd always been good at social code switching. Give her the room, she'd hold court. I used to admire that about her. Now I watched it like a magician's trick you've already seen too many times. You stop being impressed. You start waiting for the sleight of hand to fail. She had no idea the script had changed. She was speaking to the VP of strategy, some guy named Blake, all teeth and tan and tailored smugness, when her CEO, who had been mid-sentence with the CFO at the next table over, suddenly caught sight of our corner. I wasn't even looking his way, but I felt it. That split-second break in rhythm. I looked up just in time to see the CEO's expression flatten. One beat. Two. His eyes went to Bernard. Then to me. Then back to Bernard. That's when his mouth stopped moving entirely. CFO looked at him, confused. He whispered something. The CEO didn't respond. Instead, he straightened his jacket like someone had just walked in and rearranged the air molecules in the room. Then, subtly, deliberately, he excused himself from the conversation and began walking. No, drifting. Toward us. I didn't acknowledge him. Bernard didn't either. He'd returned to sipping water, eyes distant. That alone should have told the CEO everything he needed to know. Meanwhile, across the room, she was basking in her own spotlight. She had just charmed the head of compliance into telling her about upcoming expansion discussions. I could tell she was threading that needle between just curious and strategically informed. She had a gift for that, wrapping ambition in honey. Her laughter rang out again, this time high and proud, like someone who'd just landed a compliment they hadn't expected but deeply needed. She hadn't seen the ripple effect yet. The board member who'd barely touched his steak suddenly stood up and made a quiet line to our table. He was joined by another, a woman in a red blazer who only minutes earlier had been joking with the CTO. She didn't smile anymore. Now she was glancing between Bernard and me with the sort of alert respect usually reserved for auditors or coroners. One by one, they migrated. Some pretended to refill drinks and veered our direction. Others acted like they were heading toward the exit, only to pause, accidentally lock eyes with Bernard, and offer a nod so careful it could have been missed entirely. No one lingered too long, but each one left a breadcrumb of acknowledgement. And still, she didn't see it. She was too busy trying to corner a managing partner near the media wall, angling herself perfectly so the photos would show her at the epicenter of movement, relevance, future. She had no idea the nucleus had shifted. It was surreal watching it unfold from my seat, like seeing two separate events take place in the same physical space. Her gala was still full of promise, admiration, ego. Mine had become silent, strategic, clinical. Bernard finally spoke again, low enough that only I could hear. She presents well, but she doesn't listen. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He was right. Always had been. The truth is, I'd protected her from this world. For years. I'd never brought her to strategy briefings, compliance offsites, or investor weekends. She wasn't built for those rooms where the loudest voice is usually the least relevant, where reputation doesn't walk in, it watches, where one misplaced phrase echoes through hallways you don't even know exist. She didn't see that kind of power because she couldn't imagine it working in silence. She'd grown comfortable mistaking visibility for influence, and now she was surrounded by both, but couldn't tell the difference. A soft chime echoed from the ballroom speakers. Program shift. A formal welcome from the CEO would begin soon. The lights dimmed slightly, and people began drifting toward their assigned tables. That's when she finally looked toward our corner again. Her expression twitched. She'd clearly expected me to be sulking by the open bar or fumbling through awkward small talk with the spouse's table. Instead, I was seated comfortably, almost lazily, beside a man she hadn't even bothered to acknowledge when she walked in. And now that man was flanked by two board members. She looked to the CEO, who was now frozen halfway between the stage and our corner. Conflicted, sweating. His smile was gone. He wasn't hosting anymore. He was reacting. Her eyebrows pinched for half a second. Calculating. She adjusted her posture, smoothed her dress. Made to walk toward us, then stopped. A woman from internal legal brushed past her, gave her a half nod, and kept walking. The temperature dropped. That's when I saw it click. Her eyes widened just slightly, like something behind her eyes had finally caught up. Like she realized the name tag she hadn't read on Bernard's lapel. Like she finally connected the way people had stopped greeting her with warmth and started nodding with formality. Not respect, distance. She'd been the center of gravity for the first half of the evening. But now, the orbit was shifting, and she didn't know the rules of this solar system. Not anymore. 3 weeks before that gala, I was in a completely different room, gray-carpeted, sterile, and quiet, with only the sound of a ceiling vent and the hum of a printer that hadn't worked since March. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't public, but it was the most consequential 6 hours that firm had seen in a decade. A friend of mine from grad school, Samir, now a quiet monster in corporate risk, had called me on a Sunday. No pleasantries. Just, you still do cleanroom files. That was code. The kind you only understand if you've ever been the person a board calls when internal oversight fails and lawsuits are whispering at the door. He didn't need someone to fix a PR mess. He needed someone to make sure the SEC never showed up in the first place. So I did what I do. I went in. Quietly. No badge. No official capacity. Not even a traceable invoice. The file I worked on didn't go through legal. It was encrypted, unbranded, and passed through a USB drive I still haven't reformatted. What I found wasn't criminal, but it was sloppy. Real estate misclassification. Improper client onboarding protocols. Some aggressive vendor discounting practices that technically weren't violations yet, but would have raised flags during merger due diligence. The kind of stuff that doesn't make headlines, but can blow up a deal if someone with the right eyes starts asking the wrong questions. I cleaned it, rebuilt the chain of internal accountability, created a parallel compliance narrative that could be deployed if needed, but wouldn't flag if buried. For that, I was paid very well. And in lieu of the usual paper trail, I was offered something more interesting, a private invitation. Bernard Lee himself was finalizing a multi-stage acquisition that would give his investment group controlling interest in the firm. But before the final tranche was signed, he wanted to attend one event, one gala, to observe, not the presentations or quarterly updates, but the leadership culture. He wanted a ghost in the room. Someone who'd already seen the bones and now needed to feel the pulse. I said yes. I hadn't planned to tell her. Why would I? She didn't know what I really did anymore. Not for years. To her, I consulted. Some vague, non-threatening word that kept me out of her competitive shadow. It was easier that way. She liked to be the ambitious one. I let her. She'd never once asked who my clients were. Never connected that the people I worked with could buy and sell the companies she dreamed of pitching. So when she got this job, her dream role, I congratulated her. Helped her pick outfits. Practiced mock interviews. And when she got the offer letter, I didn't mention the name on the top right corner. Didn't mention that Bernard's holding firm owned a minority stake already, or that they were about to become her real bosses. I thought about it a few times, mentioning it, but then she started slipping little digs into our conversations. How she wished I were more excited about things. How some people aren't built for growth. She'd say it with a laugh, brushing her hand against my shoulder, like it was a joke that somehow hurt just enough. So I said nothing. Now, sitting at that gala, watching board members bend their posture ever so slightly in Bernard's presence, I realized something simple. I didn't need to say anything. My leverage wasn't reactive. It was already there. Pre-installed. Her sentence, "Don't let them think we're a couple," wasn't the spark. It was the audit trigger. The moment the system flagged the file for review. Because the truth is, no one knew she was my wife. Not Bernard. Not the board. Not the executives. She'd scrubbed me out of her professional life so thoroughly that she became blind to the one advantage she never considered, me. Now the dots were connecting, just not the way she wanted. The CEO hadn't pieced it together until that moment. When he saw her, and then saw me. When he realized the man he'd dismissed at the bar was the same man who had, weeks ago, rebuilt the legal scaffolding that saved their merger. That same man was now seated beside the one person holding their future in a pen. And she'd told him, "Don't let them think we're a couple." Bernard turned to me again. "She's ambitious," he said. Not a compliment. Just an observation. I nodded once. "She always has been." "She threw you away very quickly," he added. I didn't respond. There was no need. My silence was the answer. So was hers. There's a file on my laptop called Atlas_0423_V2B. No logo. No footer. Inside it, the framework of her entire company's compliance backbone, drafted in plain language and bulletproof logic. I wrote every word, and nowhere in that document does my name appear. But if that file ever surfaced, there'd be no denying who authored it. My voice is all over it. It's not proof of ownership. It's proof of understanding. And in rooms like that, that's what power sounds like. She still hadn't walked toward us. She couldn't. She was frozen in the slow realization that she hadn't just ignored me. She'd misread the entire room. Misread who mattered. Misread who I was. She spent her whole life preparing to be impressive. But no one ever taught her how to recognize invisible authority. And now, she was the one being observed. Evaluated. Wait. She just didn't know who held the scale. She was mid-anecdote, animated, chin lifted, talking about momentum mapping and iterative wins with the kind of polished confidence she'd practiced for years. The executive across from her, Glenn or Greg or something equally beige, nodded along like he understood half of it. He didn't. But it didn't matter. She didn't need him to understand. She needed him to remember her. Her name. Her energy. Her potential. And then the CEO appeared beside her like a ghost with unfinished business. His face was pale. Not sick pale, boardroom pale. The kind of color that follows realization in high-stakes environments, when a single misstep could cost you a chair, a vote, a career. He didn't interrupt with urgency or volume. Just presence. Immediate. Anchoring. She turned to him mid-sentence, her voice still in full flight. And that's when I realized the onboarding matrix had skipped. Oh, hi, Matt. I was just explaining. But Matt wasn't looking at her. He wasn't even pretending to listen. His eyes were fixed on the far side of the room. And then he said it. Do you have any idea whose guest you just said that to? It landed like a gunshot wrapped in velvet. No one else in the conversation flinched. Yet, but the words shifted something. She blinked, smile twitching. What do you mean? My husband. Matt's gaze moved to her now. Slowly. He looked at her like someone watching a tower tilt after warning the architect 3 times. His lips barely moved. No, he said. His guest. His guest. It took her half a second too long to understand what he meant. Then another second to realize what he didn't say. And then it hit her. Because it wasn't about her anymore. It was about him. The man she dismissed in a whisper. The man she'd turned into a prop. And suddenly that whisper wasn't private. It was a public event. A timestamp. A red circle on the tape. Her eyes followed Matt's. Slowly, against her better judgment. She turned toward the far corner of the room. And saw it. The table. The cluster of board members. The space around it where no one else dared linger too long. And at the center, Bernard, stoic. And her husband, calm, unreadable. Sitting like he'd been there the whole time. Like nothing in the world had surprised him tonight. And then her smile cracked. Not theatrically. Not with gasps or collapsing glasses. Just a tiny tremble. At the corner of her mouth. Like her own face betrayed her before her mind could react. She tried to laugh. To recover. Oh, I didn't realize you meant. But Matt didn't wait. He walked away. Just like that. Mid-sentence. Mid-laugh. Mid-whatever performance she was about to begin. Because that's what happens when the script changes mid-play and you realize you were never the lead. Just background. A footnote. A liability with good posture. The executive beside her, Greg or Glenn, stared after Matt, blinking. What was that about? She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. Because answering would require admitting what had just happened. That she'd embarrassed the wrong man in front of the right people. That she had just turned a silent asset into a public risk. That the CEO, her CEO, now looked at her not with pride or promise, but with dread. Because if Bernard Lee decided to walk away from the deal, there wouldn't be a next quarter. There wouldn't be a succession plan. There'd be a bloodletting. And now that risk had a face. Hers. She turned back to the room. And for the first time all night, it felt smaller, colder, less welcoming. A few people were still chatting, but the energy had shifted. The noise had dropped just enough. People weren't laughing as loud. Movements had become more restrained, strategic, calculated. She looked again at her husband. Still seated. Still unmoved. He didn't wave. He didn't smirk. He didn't even blink. Just sat beside Bernard like he belonged there. Like he always had. Like she was the only one who hadn't known. And in that moment, she understood. She hadn't just disrespected him. She'd disqualified herself. Not from the conversation. From the room. That night, the silence in the car was thick with things she didn't know how to say. Not sorry. Not thank you. Not even what just happened. She sat beside me, fiddling with her necklace like it was a worry stone, one of those nervous tics she used to suppress back when we were still trying to impress each other. I drove in silence, knuckles loose on the wheel, letting the engine do the talking. When we got home, she made a show of kicking off her heels by the door like it was just another night. Like nothing cracked. My feet are killing me, she said, with that tired laugh meant to defuse. God, that carpet felt like walking on Velcro. I nodded, walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge. Nothing worth drinking. I settled for water. She followed, leaned against the counter. So, she began, voice lighter than necessary. That was tense, huh? She gave a self-deprecating chuckle, looking at me like I was supposed to play along. I get weird at those things. Social anxiety kicks in. I start trying to be funny and, yeah, not always my best moments. I took a slow sip and said nothing. She kept going. I mean, I didn't mean anything. I was just trying to make a good impression. It's all political in that environment, right? You have to read the room. Blend in. I murmured, then set my glass down and walked past her to the living room. She followed, a bit too quickly. Babe, come on. You're not seriously upset. It's not like anyone knew who you were there. I turned. Do you know who Bernard Lee is? That stopped her. She blinked. Who? I sat down at my laptop, opened it slowly, logged in, typed in the name like I was searching for a dinner recipe. Bernard Lee search. I clicked on the first article. Quiet Titan acquires mid-tier firms, restructures from the inside out, flips them within 3 years at 4x valuation. No press releases, no branding, just transactions and silence. The article was from Forbes, then another from a tech investor blog, then a Bloomberg deep dive. A profile, the closest anyone had ever gotten. Phrases like asset phantom, the walking audit, capitalist specter. She leaned over my shoulder, reading. I scrolled. To the holding group. Assets totaling over $30 billion under various subsidiaries. And a note in one article that said, an insider source confirms Bernard Lee has been reviewing final terms to gain controlling interest in one of the fastest-growing compliance-first firms in the Northeast. Her firm. I didn't say a word. I just let the cursor hover over a highlighted sentence. Lee is known to abandon acquisitions at the 11th hour if leadership culture fails a subjective threshold he refers to as ethics under pressure. She read it 3 times, then slowly pulled away. I closed the laptop. That's the man I was sitting next to all night. She didn't speak. The man you asked me not to be seen with. Still nothing. I stood, walked back toward the kitchen. He invited me, by the way, personally, after I helped your company stay out of an inquiry that could have derailed your quarter. Wait. She finally croaked, following again. You helped the firm? I looked at her. That onboarding error you bragged about fixing? I asked calmly. I flagged that. 3 weeks ago. In the file they never told you existed. Her mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. I didn't know. No one told me. They wouldn't, I said. It wasn't meant to be seen. It was meant to work. She looked like someone had unplugged her. The posture, the confidence, all of it wilted. Bernard, I continued, wanted to get a read on the leadership team. Not just numbers. Character. Integrity. The human side of scalability. She swallowed. He's not pulling out, right? I tilted my head. Would you invest a few $100 million into a firm whose employees publicly insulted their own advisors in front of stakeholders? Her breath hitched. I didn't insult you. You diminished me. A pause. That's worse. She looked down at the floor like the tiles could save her. I didn't know who he was. I thought he was just another old man. I offered, raising an eyebrow. Another nobody I happened to know? No, she whispered. I thought you were. Smaller. She didn't respond. She didn't need to, because the realization had arrived. Finally, not with drama or tears, but that cold sensation in the ribs when you realize the wreckage isn't in the distance. It's already here. You're standing in it. She'd spent years polishing herself for success, polishing me out of the picture, rewriting the story where she was the lead and I was a comfortable background. But the credits had rolled, and suddenly, she wasn't the protagonist. She was the problem. It took less than 48 hours. 2 days after the gala, a single-page memo arrived at the firm's boardroom. No pomp, no preamble, no threat, just a simple, unervingly precise verdict. Bernard Lee would not be proceeding with the final stage of acquisition. No headline, no press release, just a brief, formal statement delivered via courier, embossed with his holding group seal, and printed on paper so heavy it might as well have been a tombstone. After confidential observation and review, we have concluded that the leadership culture within the firm demonstrates insufficient alignment with our core values of integrity, transparency, and strategic foresight. We recommend a re-evaluation of the firm's internal character pipeline before pursuing further investment engagement. No further action will be taken at this time. That was it. No names, no accusations, no drama. But it hit like a neutron bomb. Within minutes of reading it, The CEO canceled every scheduled meeting for the day, closed his door, and according to one of the executive assistants, who apparently couldn't resist whispering to another assistant, the first thing he said aloud was, "Who the hell is her husband?" The board convened in a closed session that same afternoon. Nobody said it outright, but they all knew. The memo hadn't come from a routine due diligence hiccup. It was personal, and not in the sloppy emotional sense. No, this was Bernard Lee's version of a scalpel across the firm's jawline. Sharp, surgical, and almost invisible unless you knew where to look. The worst part? The phrase, internal character pipeline. That line slithered through every conversation over the next 24 hours. Nobody wanted to admit it, but everyone was trying to decode who Bernard meant, whose face he saw when he wrote those words, whose mouth had spoken just enough stupidity to make $300 million vanish like fog. It didn't take long before her name started surfacing, not officially, not in print, but in emails, Slack threads, coffee machine pauses, conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. The executive team had started combing through every interaction from the gala, reviewing video footage, photos, seating charts, and audio logs. The firm had security mics near VIP zones, legally, quietly, just in case of liability. And then came the recording. That phrase, "Don't let them think we're a couple," captured in high quality, mid-whisper, punctuated by her soft laugh and a smile that now looked grotesquely rehearsed. You could hear the confidence, the dismissal, the very tone Bernard's letter warned against. By noon, HR had received it. By 2 p.m., legal was looped in. By 4:30, a formal internal climate inquiry was initiated. Publicly, she was still untouched. No emails, no memos. She walked the halls like nothing had changed. Still styled, still confident, still reciting her value in meetings with an edge of urgency. But everything had changed. Her CEO couldn't look her in the eye. The head of strategy stopped CCNG her. One of the interns, who used to worship her, asked to be reassigned to a different project without explanation. The walls weren't closing in. They'd already closed. She just hadn't realized it yet. When she finally did, 2 days after the memo, while standing in front of the printer watching the toner spin endlessly without printing, she pulled out her phone and called me. No greeting, just breath. Is this because of me? I didn't ask what this was. I didn't pretend to be confused. I just said, he never says anything he doesn't mean. Silence. Then, they're starting an inquiry. Not just HR, the board. They're using my sentence. My sentence. Another pause. You know what they said in the meeting today? Sometimes, culture reveals itself in the throwaway comments. I didn't respond. Do you think he told them it was me? I exhaled through my nose. Bernard doesn't need to say it. She was quiet for a while. Then, almost whispering, everyone's looking at me differently. I let that hang in the air. Because she wasn't wrong. But not for the reasons she thought. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't punishment. This was consequence. And it had been waiting patiently. The summons arrived in her inbox at 6:42 a.m., marked high importance, with the subject line, Scheduled Review, Executive Conduct and Culture Alignment. No greeting. No context. Just a location, a time, and a list of attendees. The COO, the head of HR, and one board liaison she barely recognized by name. She didn't sleep the rest of the morning. She tried to eat a banana. It stuck in her throat. She wore the same navy dress she'd worn to her final round of interviews, once a symbol of arrival, now a fragile shield. She tried to steady her hands with a triple espresso. It only made them tremble harder. At precisely 10 a.m., she stepped into conference room B, where the glass was frosted from the inside. A small, round table. No folders. No pens. Just 4 people seated in silence, waiting for her like a patient in pre-op. She sat across from them, the door clicking shut behind her with surgical finality. The COO began. Flat tone. Neutral phrasing. This is not disciplinary. You are not being terminated. This is a review of value alignment and suitability for future leadership opportunities. She nodded too quickly. Of course. I understand. He glanced to HR. A woman in a beige suit who didn't look up. We'd like to begin with your own summary. The COO continued. How do you perceive your conduct at last week's gala? Her throat tightened. She'd rehearsed this. I believe I represented the firm with enthusiasm, she began, voice tight, and a sense of personal investment. I connected with multiple stakeholders, and, did you say, the HR lead interrupted, without raising her eyes, to a guest at the event. Don't let them think we're a couple. The sentence landed like a slap from a cold hand. She blinked. Ah, yes. But that was said in jest. I. Who was the guest? She faltered. My husband, who was seated beside Bernard Lee. The words were not a question. She swallowed. I didn't know, at the time, who Bernard Lee was. The board liaison, a man with tired eyes and a blue pen he never used, finally spoke. Do you know who your husband has consulted for in the past? She opened her mouth, closed it. I'm not sure. He works in strategy, compliance sometimes. He doesn't usually. Do you know his involvement with this firm prior to the gala? She paused too long. No. The COO leaned back in his chair. The silence stretched. Then the HR lead spoke again. We're concerned, she said softly, about your judgment. Not in isolation, but in pattern. You've demonstrated strong initiative. But initiative, without awareness, becomes liability. Her breath hitched. I wasn't trying to undermine anyone. It was a misunderstanding. You didn't misunderstand, the board liaison said. You misread. The room. The relationship. The risk. She was blinking rapidly now. Had you known who he was, the COO asked, would you have said it? No. So the words were casual. But the choice was structural. That broke something in her posture. I thought, she started, but the phrase died. She had no defense. No clever pivot. No whiteboard to point at. No project to reference. Just a sentence. 7 words. And a world that now measured her by them. The HR lead finally lifted her gaze. Dismissed, she said coldly. Not angry. Not sharp. Just done. Like a verdict that had been written long before the trial began. She stood slowly. Her legs were stiff. Her breath shallow. No one rose with her. No one offered a handshake. She opened the door herself. Closed it behind her. And outside the glass, the office moved on. The firm hadn't collapsed. Just adjusted. Without her. He didn't say a word when he walked in that evening. Didn't ask how the review went. Didn't offer a glass of wine. Just moved through the house like it was a hotel room he'd overstayed. Opened the hall closet. Pulled out the black overnight bag he always said he hated using. Feels too final. And unzipped it with a sound that made her flinch. She watched from the doorway. I'm not getting fired, she said, voice small, like that would somehow change the course of what was already in motion. He folded 2 shirts. Rolled them, military tight. No wasted movement. They're saying it's just a pause, she added. An alignment process. That's all. He placed a toothbrush and shaving kit beside the shirts. Paused only to zip the interior mesh. Then reached for his running shoes. The ones she'd given him last Christmas and never saw him wear. Are you really doing this over one sentence? That finally made him stop. He turned. Looked her in the eye. No, he said. I'm doing this because you meant it. She opened her mouth, defensive. But he raised a finger. Not angry, just enough to halt whatever excuse was about to come out. You didn't say that because you were nervous. You didn't say it by accident. You said it because, in that moment, you didn't want to be associated with me. And not just because you didn't know who I was sitting with, but because you thought I was no one. He zipped the bag closed. The sound cut through the hallway like a gavel. And that, he added, that's who you are now. She stepped back, arms crossed. I supported you, she said. Everything I've done. No. Everything you did was for yourself. I was just furniture. You're being cruel. No, he said calmly. Cruelty would have been telling Bernard what you said while he was still writing the check. She went quiet. He walked past her. She turned, following. You're just going to leave? He opened the door. Paused. Turned. I'm going to let you feel what you really wanted, he said. She didn't get it at first. Then he stepped out and shut the door. He didn't slam it. Didn't leave a note. Didn't leave his key. Just walked away. She stared at the door for a long time, then looked around the house. His coat gone. His bag. His presence. And it hit her, not like thunder, but like slow ice. That creeping cold that starts in the spine and works outward. She texted him that night. For words. You ruined me. No reply for 2 hours. Then finally, the screen lit up. You introduced yourself. No punctuation. No emotion. Just a mirror held to her face. She reread it 5 times. And realized she had no idea who she was looking at anymore. It was a Tuesday. Overcast, humid, no wind. The kind of day that doesn't commit to being anything, just lingers in the air like bad news waiting to land. The quarterly shareholder meeting wasn't supposed to be dramatic. These things rarely were. There'd be graphs. Some polite applause. Maybe a new initiative slide with branding that took 5 agencies 3 months to ruin. She'd been preparing a deck, sleek, strategic, forward-looking. She knew the firm's growth metrics better than most of the executive team, and she'd even slotted herself as a potential lead for a new ESG subcommittee. It wasn't confirmed, but people had hinted, until she walked into the boardroom, and saw her name wasn't on the speaker schedule at all. Her slide deck? Gone. Replaced by a single placeholder. Org Structure Review, TBA. She sat in silence as the meeting began. No one looked her way. Not even Matt, the CEO who once asked her opinion on every branding move, who used to nod across the room at her for approval during Q&As. Now he skimmed his notes, blinked too often, and never once met her eyes. The report updates rolled by. The graphs. The growth metrics. The slide with faces of emerging leadership pipeline. Her photo used to be there. Now it wasn't. No announcement. No explanation. Just missing. Replaced by a blur of newer hires. Some she had mentored. Others she had ignored. Her breath caught somewhere behind her ribs. She checked her phone under the table. One new email. Subject: internal realignment. From HR business partner. Body: effective immediately. Redacted: will be reassigned to internal audit and compliance observation pending full cultural alignment review. She will not participate in external stakeholder engagements until further notice. Please direct all investor inquiries elsewhere. Thank you for your continued professionalism. No greeting. No signature. Just erasure. She scrolled to the CC list. 10 names. All of them senior. All of them new. She left the meeting early, pretending she had a call. No one stopped her. No one asked. The next day, her desk was moved. Not physically, but symbolically. Her projects disappeared from dashboards. Shared folders revoked access. Her Slack profile was quietly adjusted. Currently on support track rotation. Her inbox slowed to a trickle. She wasn't fired. That would have been clean. This was worse. She was there. Present. Badged. Accounted for. But erased. No one briefed her. No one invited her to planning sessions. Her calendar, once bursting with alignment calls and deck reviews, now featured 2 items: lunch and weekly check-in, HR liaison. No direct reports. No meetings with partners. No future. She reached out to a mentor, someone who used to praise her as boardroom ready. The reply came a day later. Short. Polite. Cold. Let's connect next quarter once things settle. Things wouldn't settle. She was radioactive, and they were just waiting for the Geiger counter to die out on its own. She scrolled through her contacts, desperate for someone who didn't know. Someone who'd pick up. No one answered. Her LinkedIn messages slowed, then stopped. The woman from the gala. The one with the smirk and the confident laugh and the perfectly timed jokes about owning the room was nowhere to be found. All that remained was her title. Still technically strategy manager. But everyone knew that title meant nothing now. She wasn't fired. She was forgotten. And the silence was louder than any accusation. It arrived on a Thursday, just before noon. She was at her desk, the one they'd moved her to after the restructuring, positioned so precisely between 2 silent walls that no one had to pass her unless they meant to. She didn't get real mail anymore. No one sent her packages. Even the department birthday cards had stopped circulating her way. So when the receptionist walked in holding a plain gray envelope and asked, "Are you Miss Langford? Not your name is on this. But do you still belong here?" She already knew something wasn't right. The envelope was heavy. No return address. Just a raised wax seal she didn't recognize until she squinted. Then her stomach dropped. The courier had already turned to leave. She held the envelope a moment longer, feeling its weight in her hands, half tempted to bury it in the trash before opening. But something in her, call it pride, call it punishment, needed to know. She peeled it open carefully. Inside was one single sheet. Not typed. Not signed. Just a handwritten message in dark ink. Trust isn't granted. It's noticed. No greeting. No explanation. Below it, paper clipped with surgical precision, was a high-resolution still image printed on matte stock. No border. No context. Just one frozen frame. She stared at it for almost a full minute before she understood what she was seeing. It was from the gala. From that moment. She was caught mid-whisper, shoulder turned, lips pursed in that performative hush she used when she wanted to seem intimate and clever. The photographer, or security camera, more likely, had captured her just as the words left her mouth. Her expression was unmistakable, smug, rehearsed, a woman in full control of her narrative. But that wasn't what froze her. It was the background. Just behind her, clear as daylight, stood her husband, shaking Bernard Lee's hand. A quiet, simple handshake. Not flashy, not theatrical, but full of recognition. 2 men who knew what power really was. And she was turned away, whispering into oblivion, pretending she understood the room. Her fingers went cold. She flipped the page. On the back of the image, a single sentence was printed in sharp, serif type. Character is a silent guest. And we remember how we're treated. That was it. No threat. No warning. Just record keeping. Legacy. She sat there for a long time, envelope in her lap, eyes blurred. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. That would have implied she had something left to lose. What she felt wasn't panic anymore. It was understanding. The kind that arrives too late to change anything. Not just about what she'd done, but about who she'd become.